When I was a child, I had dreamed of visiting Albania someday, but if you know anything about the history of the country, then you know that it was ruled by a dictator who basically closed the country to the outside world. Well, all of this changed in 1991, probably the most important year in the recent history of Albania. Communism was falling, and the country was in a state of transition and confusion. I was 19 years old that year, and I saw in a magazine that a travel agency was organizing a tour to Albania for Americans. So my mom and I signed up to go, and we were only the second group of Americans to visit the country after decades of being banned. Recently, I, now aged 51, came back to Albania, this time with my wife Emily, to see just how much this country has changed. And that is what I will be showing you in this video. The traffic. This is by far the biggest difference I noticed in Albania now compared to 1991. What a difference a few decades makes, seriously. When I was here in 1991, there was no traffic, and I mean literally none at all. And that's because the private ownership of vehicles was not allowed under communism. So as you're seeing in these pictures, there were very few cars on the road. Now, because I visited Albania just after the collapse of communism, people were now at this point allowed to buy cars. We actually went to a car auction in a city called Tirana. The two cars you see in the photo were being sold. A lot of people were gathered around to see the two cars, but who could afford to buy a car back then, right? Now there are so many cars that the roads just can't accommodate all of the traffic, especially in Tirana. Although the traffic is still reasonable in smaller towns like Korcha, which you're seeing in this video clip here. Tirana. Tirana is of course Albania's capital and biggest city, and the one building that stands out to me when it comes to a now and then comparison is the Pyramid Building. It was built in 1988 as a museum dedicated to the Albanian leader 𝗔𝗟𝗕𝗔. Here's what the building looked like when I took this picture in 1991. I remember back then thinking that, although the architecture was unique and interesting because of its shape, the atmosphere just felt kind of dead because nothing was going on and there were very few people around. But here it is today. You can see it's very lively now. You can even climb up to the roof. Notice the skyscraper in the background. That didn't exist in 1991. It's missing from the photo. In fact, the tallest building in the country in 1991 was the Tirana International Hotel, which is the hotel we stayed in. This photo is what the hotel looks like today. I remember our room was in pretty bad shape. The windows were broken and the toilet didn't work right, but there were excellent views over Skanderbeg Square from our room. I took this photo and you can see the Italian army trucks that were delivering humanitarian aid driving through the square. Here's another photo I took from our hotel window, and if you look really closely, you see a pedestal for a statue, but the statue is missing. It had been a statue of the communist leader, and when communism fell, many Albanians were angry and tore the statue down. Here is what that area looks like today. There is no indication that there was ever a statue here. Now it's just trees and grass. This picture you're seeing of the National History Museum looks almost the same then as it looks now, don't you think? I don't notice much of a difference. I love the mosaic on the building, which shows important figures in Albania history. And the Opera House looks pretty much the same to me. Here it is then, and here it is now. Back in 1991, there was a banner hanging from the building advertising the first National Assembly of the Democratic Party. Korcha. Okay, let's head over to Korcha, which is the town in eastern Albania, and happens to be the town where my grandfather was born in 1915. He was only 1 year old when he came to America, so he had no memories of Albania. Here's a picture of me and my mom when we came here 33 years ago. I have to tell you, I really enjoyed coming to Korcha, both in 1991 and again now. And I know having ancestry from Korcha is part of the reason I feel a connection to this town, but also because Korcha doesn't get too much tourism. It feels like authentic and traditional Albania to me. Here's a photo I took in 1991 in Korcha. I believe this building is a bank or some kind of office building. And here is a photo of the same building now. The first difference I notice is the trees. Now the road is lined with these beautiful trees. Back in 1991, not so many trees. And the apartments on the side here and here are still there. You can't see them in the photo from the ground, but from above, you can see those two curved apartment buildings are still there. I'd be curious to know if anyone who lived in those apartment buildings in 1991 are still living there today. What do you think? Another photo I took in 1991 is of a statue that didn't exist anymore because it was a statue of a communist leader, possibly the dictator 𝗔𝗟𝗕𝗔, and was destroyed by the citizens of Korcha. On our recent trip, I asked around to try to find out where this statue was located. One lady told me it was located here where this statue is now, but I'm not sure that's correct. The church you see in the background wasn't built until 4 years after I was here in 1991, so I suppose it is possible. In 1991, our tour drove us up to the top of a hill that overlooks the city. Here we are now. This photo is taken from the same spot, and I know it's the same spot because these three patches of grass are identical to the ones in the older photo. Notice in the older photo that the landscape is very brown and dry. We were there in September. In the new photo, everything is more green, and that's because it was taken in May. If you zoom on the older photo, I can see smoke coming out of a big smokestack. The smokestack is still there, but we didn't see any smoke coming out. On this trip, when we were at the top of this hill, we noticed there was a cemetery there. So we started walking through the cemetery and noticed a grave of someone born in 1915 with the last name of 𝗔𝗟𝗕𝗔𝗓. My grandfather was also born in Korcha in 1915, and his last name was 𝗔𝗟𝗕𝗔. But I wonder if his actually was 𝗔𝗟𝗕𝗔𝗓, and it somehow got changed to 𝗔𝗟𝗓 when his family moved to America. And I can't help but wonder if I am somehow related to the person buried here. In 1991, we went to a livestock auction just outside of Korcha, where people were selling cows and horses and sheep. I don't know if these types of auctions are still going on today, but this part of Albania seems to have held on a little bit more to its traditional way of life, so I wouldn't be surprised if these types of auctions are still happening today. The people. One thing that has not changed is the friendliness of the Albanian people. The people we met back in 1991 were so hospitable, so kind, and this is despite the fact that so many of these people back then were suffering from poverty and suppression. These people would have given us the shirt off their backs if needed. And remember that Albania was closed to tourism for so long, so the people were not used to seeing foreigners in their country. I remember that when some members of our tour group got lost, the guide asked the children to search for them, and these kids were so happy to be helpful to us. And today, the people are just as helpful, just as friendly, just as kind. I mentioned in my Tirana video that when these two men saw that we didn't have any drinks in the restaurant where we were eating, they offered to buy drinks for us. And also how every time we were at a bus station, somebody would offer to help us find the right bus, even without us asking for help. Now, one thing that I think has changed about the people is their ability to speak English. In 1991, I met only one person, other than our tour guide, who spoke English. It was this young man in the photo here. Now English is widely spoken, especially by the Albanians who were born after I was here the first time in 1991. So a big thank you and faleminderit to the Albanian people, both now and to the Albanian people in 1991. Hey, tap that subscribe icon there. This video is about the great and not so great things about Tirana today. This video is about Albania's beach resort of Saranda, and down here we have the pros and cons for a long-term stay in Albania. Thanks for traveling with us.